You're listening to the Wonderfully Bookish podcast, where we talk about all things bookish and wonderful. You can find the notes for this episode and all of the others at wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast. Hi, welcome back to the Wonderfully Bookish podcast, where I discuss all things bookish and wonderful. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking a bit about how to deal with burnout. I know this might not seem like a topic that's very, very relevant to a podcast about books, but bear with me here. I'm going to focus mostly on burning out in terms of blogging and reading, because I know a lot of the people who listen to this are probably bloggers, and what to do when you find yourself in a reading or a blogging slump. And I'll go a little bit into kind of general life as well. So let's go.
It's wonderfully bookish, whoa. All things books, let's start the show. Everything from classics to contemporary. Come and chat about books with me. If you're a reader of YA, grab a cuppa and just press play.
So usually, burning out tends to follow on from trying to do too much. And I know this feeling far too well. In my previous episode with Holly, we talked a little bit about this, about kind of spreading ourselves too thin and kind of working so hard that it just kind of grinds us down. And I know we can all do it. So I think the main thing that comes with burnout is just overwhelm. I don't think you can really burn out too hard if you're not completely overwhelmed. I'm so bad at trying to do too much at once, and my brain just kind of gets overwhelmed and just goes into shutdown. And then it leads to a massive slump where you just don't want to do anything, even the stuff you know you enjoy. And that can kind of be a really sucky feeling when you know that you enjoy something, but you just don't want to do it. Now, I just want to kind of put a side note in here. I'm not talking about anything as serious as like depression, because I know that's a completely different thing. Anyone can experience a burnout or a slump in motivation. But I know depression is a completely different thing. And I know kind of not enjoying things that, or not wanting to do things that you enjoy, can kind of be a side effect. But if you find yourself kind of feeling worse about things, then please talk to someone. But I'm just going to kind of talk about what to do when you just need a big pickup to get yourself back off the ground and get yourself going again. So trust me, I'm talking from experience. I'm one of the worst when it comes to trying to drag myself out of a slump. So I thought I could try and give you a little bit of advice to help you do it faster. So I'll start talking about blogging because, as I said, I think a lot of the people who might listen to this podcast are bloggers like me. And falling into a blogging slump can be so easy to do because here's the thing with blogging. It's a completely solo thing, unless obviously you have someone you're doing it with, and you can kind of discuss things with them and you can bounce off each other and get ideas. If you're just a blogger on your own, it can feel like a very kind of solo thing, and when you're doing something on your own and you're solely responsible for something, it can be really difficult to motivate yourself to do it. So I think the first thing you need to work out, if you're feeling that you're kind of like, if your last post was like 3 months ago and you just either don't have any ideas or you just can't be bothered to write anything, I think the first thing you need to do is just work out what is causing your burnout. Are you stuck in a rut? Are you kind of bored doing the same kind of thing over and over again? Do you just kind of look at your posts and think, ugh, like this is just getting a bit boring. I don't want to write any of these. Yeah, are you just kind of bored with the content that you're posting? Or are you trying to do too much? Maybe look at your schedule and think, okay, trying to post every single day of the week is making me have a nervous breakdown. Um, you need to find ways to simplify your process. And that's something that I worked on um, sometime last year. I looked at what I was doing when I was just in such a massive slump with things. I looked at everything I was doing to do with my blog and realized that I was just trying to make everything far too complicated. I think my trouble is because I'm a virtual assistant, which basically means I'm like a marketing assistant, but I work from home. Um, and I work on some people's blogs, and that blog is their career rather than just a hobby. And I think some of the things they do almost rub off on me. And I try to make things far too complicated for something that I know is just a little hobby on the side. So I find ways just to completely simplify my process. I even put together kind of um, graphics templates and even post templates. I would put together a big review template and I could just fill in the gaps. And that kind of made things a lot easier for me, a lot less time consuming, because I think time is the thing that we all struggle with most. So, yeah, you just need to find some ways to simplify your process, whether that's just posting less often or uh, coming up, like I said, coming up with templates just to almost drag and drop things into place. And also not worry so much about having to blog everything. So if you're a book blogger, don't worry too much about having to get a book review up for every single book you read, because that can just get a bit monotonous and you'll find yourself not reading for fun. Um, so if it's ideas that you're struggling with rather than time, um, sit down with a piece of paper and a pen, or just get a Word document open, or anywhere you can just write down things and just sit and brainstorm a ton of blog post ideas. And by that, I mean write down literally anything that comes to your head, no matter if your ideas are complete rubbish. Um, kind of go for quantity over quality. And I know blogging isn't all about quantity, but just in writing down your ideas and getting down your ideas on the page, um, focus on writing anything that comes into your head. Don't worry about, oh, well, that won't be a good post, or um, I can't think of much to write about that. Just write down absolutely anything that comes into your head. And writing one thing down might suddenly spark something, and you'll think, oh, hang on, I can write about this. I can kind of link these things together. And um, it really helps just kind of almost free writing any of the ideas that come into your head. Um, it might help kind of spark you, and it'll motivate yourself to kind of just start putting some posts together. Uh, and ultimately, if you're completely stuck, there is absolutely nothing wrong with just stepping back and taking some time away. The world isn't going to end if you don't blog for a couple of weeks or even a month, or even a couple of months. Um, just let people know that you're doing it if you have to. So either just put out a tweet saying I'm taking a couple of weeks away, um, and I'll be back soon. But don't put a deadline on it. That's the one thing that is so bad for productivity, I think, is putting a deadline on something. So you don't say, I'm going to be back on the 1st of June with all these new blog posts, because then as that date creeps nearer and nearer, you're just going to be worrying yourself even more about, oh, well, I told everyone I'd be back on this date and I'm nowhere near ready. Just tell yourself, I'll come back when I have some ideas. And if you get a dip in your stats, it doesn't matter. You just don't want to burn yourself out, because then you'll risk kind of never wanting to come back to it, which isn't good. So, yeah, just step away, take some time away from it, and you might start to miss it and think, I really want to go back to writing now. So, next, we're going to talk about reading and reading slumps. And a reading slump is something that I find myself in so regularly, especially recently. I mentioned in another episode that I read like 60 books or something in 2017, and then I read about 12 last year throughout the entire year. That's like one book a month, which for me isn't very good. Um, so a few tips that I found useful just for myself, and I find other people saying as well, just to help yourself get out of this reading slump that you're in and start to enjoy reading again. One big thing is don't be afraid to not finish a book. As us bloggers say, DNF it. Do not finish it. Books you don't enjoy are not worth your time. If you're in the middle of a book but you're not motivated to finish it at all, even flick a couple of chapters ahead if you want to, and just kind of scan it and see if you think you might get back into it. If you really have absolutely no interest in finishing this book, don't finish it. Just don't make yourself finish something that you know you're not enjoying. We don't have enough time in the day to sit and kind of chug through something that we know we're not enjoying. And this is only something that I've recently kind of learned to do, because in the past I've been such a completionist. Like, I've been like, I need to finish this book, and if I don't finish it I'm going to be really annoyed because I already own it. And uh which is just stupid, because you can give a book away, you can sell it, just give it to a friend. If you're really not enjoying it, there is no point in wasting your time. Don't force yourself to read it. One thing you can do if you do feel a bit guilty about not finishing it is just start something else. Just put the book down, put it back on the shelf, kind of ignore it for a bit. Um, Pick up a book that you've been really excited to read. So if you've got a new release that you've been kind of dying to read, or if you've just got a book on your shelf that for months you've been thinking, I really need to get round to reading that, just pick that up and start reading it. Even if you're halfway through another book, just don't worry. Like, there's no law to say you can't read a couple of different books at once. Um, just start reading something that you're really excited about. And I know from experience, I've done that, and it's kind of almost triggered something to that makes me want to start reading all of my books again. And sometimes I've gone back to that book that I put down that I couldn't finish, and I've carried on reading it and absolutely loved it. And I've just kind of wondered, what was it last time that I didn't like about it? And most of the time, it's just because you need a bit of a break from it. You need to come back to it, and you'll realize after you've kind of sat on it for a while, this is actually quite a good book. But again, if you do come back to it and you just don't want to read it, don't bother. There's really no point in making yourself come back to it. And then for this one, I'm going to repeat the point that I said for blogging, is don't feel like you have to review everything. Just sometimes you just need to enjoy reading for what it is rather than for being a blogger. You don't need to worry about reviewing anything, like everything that you read. If you feel like you might want to, then sure, make a few notes or get some like sticky tabs you can put in your books for points you want to remember. But if you don't get a review up the second you finish a book, it really isn't the end of the world. It doesn't matter. If you want to get that review up at some point, then cool, but there's really no rush. So, like, unless it's a proof copy or a new release or something, and you want to get on the back of all the publicity, then sure, try and put it out if you can. But especially if it's an older book that's already been out for a while, there's really no point in rushing to get your review out. It'll just stress you out, and it's not worth it. So I'm gonna quickly talk about work and hobbies as well, because I know for me, those are the two things that I've struggled with most recently. especially things like work. Work burnout can often feel unavoidable because you're being paid to do your job. Um, I know when I kind of completely burnt out a few months ago, it was last year, I got to a point where there were loads of rubbish things happening just in my personal life. And I just kind of couldn't really do anything. I just needed a day off. But I left it way too late, and I ended up having to almost take kind of an emergency day off, which obviously isn't great for your work if you need to say, I need to take the day off tomorrow. Um, if you can recognize as soon as you can that you realize that you're kind of falling out of things and you need to just take a break, otherwise you're just going to explode, then do that. You really shouldn't have to suffer doing your work, even if you are being paid for it. Like, we can feel like we're stuck in it and you can't just take a day off. I mean, I'm lucky because I have a very flexible job. I work from home, and my whole job is quite flexible. But even if you're not in a position where you're just flexible enough to say, I need a day off, go and speak to someone. There will be someone you can speak to a lot of the time who you can kind of just talk to them, and they might be able to help you out, even if you have a half day, or they can give you a kind of more relaxed day. And make sure that you make the most of your days off. This is another thing that I'm so bad at, is that when I have days off or weekends or whatever, I feel like I need to do something productive with my day. That isn't the case. It doesn't matter if you just want one day to sit and watch TV or Netflix, or just read a book all day, or just do nothing at all. Do not feel guilty for doing nothing. That's the number one thing I think can just lead to burnout, is feeling like you have to be productive every minute of every day, and you're wasting a day if you don't do anything. And this is similar in hobbies as well. I wrote a blog post ages ago now, I'll link it in the notes, all about kind of wanting to do way too many things at once, and worrying that there's not enough time in the day to do all the things, and not enough headspace. Like, there's not enough space in your brain to be able to do all of the things that you want to do in one go. But don't try to do everything at once. You don't need to. There's plenty of time to try out everything you want to do. You don't have to do it all right now. So a tip I have for this is just keep a journal, or even just a Word document or a notebook or anything, of all the things you want to do, and just kind of empty all your thoughts onto the page rather than keeping them piled up. Sometimes having a list in front of you of, these are the things that I kind of want to do, or like projects that I want to try out, or new hobbies I think could be fun to pick up. Anything at all, just get it on the page, and you'll have a nice list in front of you of all the things that you kind of want to try out. And just doing that will get it all out of your brain and onto the page. You don't need to keep thinking. I don't know about you, but if I want to try something new, I keep thinking about that thing in case I forget about it. um, I don't want to kind of forget about it and think, oh man, yeah, I wanted to try that. If you get it on the page, you'll have like a good list in front of you of all the things that you want to try out, and you can just start working your way through them. It doesn't matter if you don't get to some of them anytime soon, because you have plenty of time. One thing is also kind of uh quite useful, is telling someone that you want to do something, and it'll kind of feel more real in your head, like more like a concrete goal. For example, I knew for ages that I wanted to join a theatre group, so I just kind of kept it in my head and didn't really tell anyone about it, until I eventually told people that that was what I wanted to do. Like, I'm kind of interested in getting back into theatre again. What do you think? And their enthusiasm kind of gave me the drive to actually do it. And now it was the best choice I made to join this group. I talked more about it in episode 6, I think, where I gave a quick recap of what has been going on in my life. I talked more about joining the theatre group then, in case you're interested. But just telling someone is the one thing that made me think, you know what, someone knows about this now. They're kind of keeping me accountable. And you've then got someone saying, "Oh, have you done this yet? Have you tried this out?" And that can sometimes be the drive you need to just get out and do it. Just start doing it. So just tell someone, tell a friend, tell a parent, tell someone on social media. Just tell someone that you want to do this thing. And I think it'll be a good way of keeping yourself accountable, of wanting to try it out. So I hope this helps someone. I've just kind of done a brief overview of each of the ways that you could be burning out in your life. I just hope that a few of my tips help you out a bit. And I think hearing some of these tips would have helped me a lot. When I went through that time a few months ago where I just kind of didn't want to do anything. I completely, as I said, just burnt out. I was kind of Googling what other people were saying and kind of putting together my own tips, and I just tried to get myself through it. So just know that if you feel like you're struggling with something, just talk to somebody that you feel comfortable talking to, and it'll be a huge weight off your shoulders, just to tell someone that you feel like you need a bit of a break. And they might be able to help you. They might be able to just say, calm down, like, I'll take some of the things off your hands. Same with if you're at work. If you tell someone at work, you don't know, the worst that can happen is that they'll just say, well, there's not very much we can do about it, but just try and take it easy. But they might be amazing. They might give you extra time off. They might kind of tell you to take some of your holiday. But just telling someone that you're struggling is the best thing you can do. And in terms of kind of the more trivial things, maybe like blogging and reading and things, they're really not the end of the world. If you don't post something for a month, then the world isn't going to collapse. If you don't read a book for a while, then, I mean, sure, you'll probably keep buying more books if you're like me, and then they'll start to pile up. But it doesn't matter. If you've got a lot of books that you need to read, why does that matter to your life? Like, it's a trivial thing to have a lot of books that you need to read. It doesn't really matter, does it, in the overall scope of your life? So just kind of make sure that you're prioritizing right. Prioritize yourself over anything else, anything at all. Work, family, friends. You need to prioritize yourself. And I think that's something that we all struggle with, me included. So let's get through this together. If you need to chat, then feel free to, you can just message me on Twitter. I'll leave my link in the notes, or you can find any of my links on my website. And that's at wonderfullybookish.co.uk. So tell me how you've been feeling. Do you kind of agree with any of this? Are you struggling with things? If you go to my podcast page, then you can leave a comment. Click on the show notes for this episode, and you can leave a comment at the bottom of the post. Let's just have a big chat about it, and we can all hold each other up, and we can all support each other, and it will all be wonderful. So I hope you have a great week, and I'll be back soon with a new episode. See you soon. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. You can find all of the information from this episode, including all of the things that we talked about and a little bit about today's guest, in the show notes, and they'll be at wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and the links for those will also be in the show notes. And finally, if you want to chat, or you've just got a burning question you want to ask about this episode or any of the others, you can pop me an email at podcast@wonderfullybookish.co.uk. See you next time.